We are the proud official partner of the Kentucky Derby. What that means for us is that we can host a virtual Kentucky Derby in the game. We do it every month. Churchill has their own track, so they live in the ecosystem just like all of us, and they're also incentivized to get more people to come race at the virtual Churchill Downs. So a very traditional 150-year-old organization. So what do we do with this kind of like crazy WAGMI GM community compared to Churchill Downs community? But what it allows is this sort of like Kentucky Derby can matter all year round. It can matter in other locations. You can really start to make this brand spread to other places.
This episode is brought to you by Access Protocol. Access Protocol is the best way to get access to premium crypto content without the ads, without the annoying subscriptions that are impossible to cancel. It's crypto native. It's here today. Go check them out. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Lightspeed. Today, we are joined by Ian Cummings, who has been in gaming for over 23 years. He worked at EA Sports, Zynga, FanDuel, and now he's full-time in Web3. While he's at EA, I think there's a fun fact. He created the hit stick, which if you've played Madden before, it's how you absolutely destroyed people. Probably not allowed now with CTE and everything that's going on, but pretty amazing background, Ian. So welcome to the show.
Thanks. Yeah, so happy to finally be on here. I've been following you guys forever.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we're pumped to have you on. I think it'd be interesting to start with your background in gaming and how I believe it was NCAA 1999 that changed your trajectory.
Yeah, look at you with the good research. Yeah, a friend of mine at college, I was at the University of Tennessee. He was an absolute stud at NCAA 99. I mean, just destroyed everyone that came across him at every exploit in the book. Every time you'd play him, you would just get sacked. You would fumble every time you ran the ball. It was just so annoying. Just so happened then EA Sports was going around in a van with a couple of QA people trying to recruit college kids to be testers. And so they showed up at the University of Tennessee. They went to most SEC schools, and they showed up. He destroyed everyone in the tournament. They invited him to go to the national championship because he was so good. I don't think he won there. He came in like second or third, but they said, "Well, would you like to be a tester?" And he said, "I guess, sure. This summer, in between our semesters, can my buddy Ian come? He plays a lot of games too." And they're like, "Yeah, whatever." And so from that moment on, it was about 3 months. I was emailing EA like, "Hey, do I have a job?" This is again here in Orlando. Got the QA lead guy would just like ghost me. He was apparently turned out when I got here, he was just addicted to EverQuest. That's all he did. He didn't even really do any testing or anything. And so I literally, I'm telling my mom like, "Hey, I think I'm going to move to Orlando for the summer, and be a tester." She's like, "Well, what's the job? What's this?" I'm like, "I don't know. I'm just going to go." And so eventually we get to the summer and I just hadn't heard anything. And I just said, "Forget it. If they don't accept me, I'll go be a bartender or something." And so I just showed up at the front door of EA Sports. "Hey, can I be a tester?" And they were like, "Yeah, whatever." go test Madden 2000 PC. So that was my first game. And then, yeah, it was it. I mean, I was the red pill for game dev. That was always what I wanted to do, but I didn't really know how to get into the industry or anything. But that summer of testing, I mean, I never left the office. I would work double shifts. I just loved it. It was absolutely eye-opening. Meeting programmers was like meeting rock stars to me, finding out how the games were made. And so I spent that whole summer just really loving it, totally in love with it. And so they offered me a full-time job at the end of that summer, and I turned it down because I was like, well, I got to get my degree. I can't quit school. And I got back to school, and within like 2 weeks, I was like, why on earth did I say no to that? So I dropped out and went back. That was the start of my career at EA. Yeah, off of that little gaming tournament.
Okay, so you were at EA for, was it about 10 years?
Yeah, a decade, almost on the dot.
And was it Madden, more or less? Was that your main focus?
Yeah, I mean, it was Madden and NCAA football were the majority of the time. So when I first got there, I actually tested NASCAR. I was a lead tester of NASCAR, which was the first game that we shipped on the original Xbox. So that was a fun, like little, I got a plaque for these types of things. And so it was pretty cool to kind of be a part of that hardware journey, their very beginning. And like, I was there when they brought in the first PS2 dev kit, and you're like, wow, that was a huge jump. If you guys are old enough to even remember how different things were going from kind of sprite based stuff to 3D. And so it was really cool to kind of see that step and as still a very young, college kid in essence. And so once I got into production where I was designing the games, I did end up doing a lot of gameplay. That was always my favorite part. You mentioned the hit stick. That these things were always like I really loved everything with the controller, how the game felt, the playbooks, all of the sort of cameras, all of that stuff has always been stuff I really loved. And so a lot of time there, as we moved into, I guess they call it Gen 3, the Xbox 360, PS3 era, I did work on both games. So I did have to like create a lot of stuff custom for college and for Madden. So we had a gameplay team that I was the head of that sort of like split a lot of common shared code between the two games. But then once I had expressed enough displeasure with the way Madden was going, they finally gave me the job to be the creative director on Madden 10. And so I did that for basically 2 years, and then I was too burned out and left after that.
What is the story behind the hit stick? How did that? Because that's like it's I think like I've heard rappers mention it in like songs. So it's certainly very. It's what I mean, especially people in America. I don't think maybe people in Europe wouldn't know it as well, but like it's an iconic thing. So what is the story there?
Yeah, it's in the vernacular. It's like I'm really proud to kind of like just out of nowhere have this in the lexicon. It's part of what announcers say it. If you Google it or you search it on YouTube, it's just when there's a big hit in football, they go, "Oh, it's a hit stick," and it's wild, that was what it was. So I think what happened, if I remember right, around 03, NBA Live or one of the other EA Sports games had done something with the right stick. I can't remember what it was. It was dunk, or it was a dunk contest, or there was someone in EA Sports that had done something with the right stick, and people were like, "Oh, that's cool. What could we do next year on Madden with the right stick?" And I had just gotten into doing motion capture. They had let me run. One of the previous guys that was there had sort of helped teach me how motion capture worked. And so I went up and had this idea of like, well, what if you flicked the stick and it just blasted the other guy? Because we had done, oh, that's right, we had done the previous year, we had done playmaker control with that right stick. So the year that Vic was on the cover, we had asked him when he came into the studio, and we all met him, and we were just sort of like asking him, what is going through his head? What is, how does he approach the line of scrimmage and all that stuff? And he talked a lot about improvisation. As he's rolling out, he'll point people in different directions and all this kind of stuff. And so that's where the first thing we did. We said the right stick was like, okay, point for a guy to change directions. And so as you're rolling out, I have a patent on that, which is wild. But as you're rolling out with Vic, you hit the right stick and he'll point and the guy will go in the other direction. So it was the following year, Madden 05, we're like, we need something for defense because that was only offense. Well, all right, defense, that makes sense. Flick a stick and you'll hit a guy. So anyway, all that to go back to motion capture. I basically was like, this is going to be my first shoot that I run all by myself. We shot in Vancouver. And we had this idea that we were going to just have these huge hits, and we didn't really know who we could get to do it. So I call a friend of mine, my best friend, actually growing up, who I played Madden with my whole life, and my buddy Ted Welch, and he's actually an actor. He was a collegiate football player at like a D3 school. And I said, "Hey, do you want to come up and do this Madden mocap shoot?" He's just like, "I don't know, I'm kind of out of shape, and I'm not sure. I'm big enough for this and that." I'm like, "Dude, it'll be fine. It's like $2,500 a day." And he's like, "All right, I'm there." So he shows up in Vancouver, and he has no idea that I'm like, "You're gonna be the tackling dummy for this feature." And so we line up, we get there, and the defender was this guy, Zach Zadalis, who had played at University of Florida, who was like 6'4", brick house monster, and Ted's like 6'1", 6'2", out of shape. And I was like, all right, so this first one, you're just gonna run at him, and he's gonna run at you. And I was kind of like, maybe close your eyes. I don't know, And I mean, the first hit I think gave him a concussion. It was ridiculous. He's just teed off on him. And then we had to go all the way around the angles, It's like, so he gets that first one, and I'm like, all right, move over a half a degree and do it again, all right, move over half, because he basically, you had to fill out the whole like rotation. And I mean, after the third or fourth one, like you could tell he was absolutely bell rung, like just back then, of course, you don't really understand what kind of damage it was. But all that to be said, we were 23, 24, like, and it's just two buddies from Hendersonville, Tennessee. that had this random idea, and I, of course, unfortunately, put him up to it. And but now it's like a lot of those animations were in there forever. I think they've recaptured some. You mentioned the NFL, not too thrilled with some of those early ones that we did that were like really violent. But we contributed to the the national conversation with this just like random idea. So yeah, I had a Twitter thread I did like maybe a couple years ago. I was actually going to re-bring it up and just because I sent Ted some emails of like, could you respond back with like, what were you thinking? What happened? What was your thought process as you like he had no clue, just shows up in Vancouver. And then it's like for basically 2 days straight, get hit as hard as possible in the face, while running with his eyes closed. So yeah, that was where it started. Mm-hmm.
That's epic. Yeah. The hit stick was infamous. Before that, if you wanted to tackle someone and get like a big hit on the game, you had to dive. You had to hit like X, and that's all you could do. $2,500 a day isn't bad. And that Michael Vick game, for anyone that didn't play Madden or isn't as old as me, he was the best player in Madden history.
That game was broken. You could not.
So broken.
Unstoppable.
Those were the golden days, though. I mean, I think 04 and 05 were definitely the best ones we made, and that was the best part. 04 was very like heavily, of course, like if you use Vic, he was kind of unstoppable, and that was sort of fun. It was a Tech Mobile style like Bo Jackson moment of like, all right, you and your buddies have to agree, handshake deal. All right, no Vic, But then 05 really balanced it pretty well, and that was a good sort of backstory too of like we met with real coaches that year, a lot of them, and asked them how do they stop Vic because they were having the same struggles that Madden was. It was like we didn't have defenses there was no such thing as a QB spy style defense until Vic, and so there were things that they were like, well, here's what we've had to do to contain him, and we implemented all of that in 05 as well as the hit stick. And it was all these other like defensive modes that then like the game got Madden 05 was really well balanced and it's still a lot of fun. So that's
pretty wild. Mm-hmm. That's wild that you guys talk to like literal NFL coaches to see how you might stop somebody in the game. Yeah. Based on the real thing. Yeah. Because the play was just generally you do a Hail Mary and then everybody just goes and then you just go with a Vic and then that's an easy like 40-yard gain.
Yeah. Okay. Running back and forth, there was, golden era for sure.
Quick break to tell you about Access Protocol, the easiest and best way to stay up to date on what's happening in crypto by following your favorite publishers. And you can do all of it without a subscription, without having to worry about ads. And we all know subscriptions. How many do you have? 10, 20? Can you cancel it? It's all a mess. Well, Access Protocol solves this, and they do it in a crypto native way. They have over 60 publishers that include CoinGecko, The Block, Crypto Slate, and a whole long list of independent creators. So how it works is you find your favorite publishers and you stake the ACS token. That's the Access token. And once you stake, you have access to all that creator's content without the hassle of ads or subscriptions that you can't cancel and you don't know how many you have. Access Protocol already has over 225,000 users that are finding new creators, that are reading content, and even receiving NFTs from these creators. Because one of the cool things with Access Protocol is that these publishers, they can know who their subscribers are. They can make it where, okay, maybe we'll do an in-person event, or maybe we'll do an NFT drop, and we'll do it only to our most loyal stakers, aka readers. In early 2024, they're even releasing V2. It's crypto native, it's on Solana, and it's an awesome product. But a link in the show notes to the hub. It's the easiest way to get started, so go check them out today. Quick break to tell you about an upcoming event I promise you don't want to miss. It's Blockworks' biggest and best institutional conference called DAS London. It's a 2-day event happening in London this March, where we're going to have over 700 institutions, 130 speakers, and a couple thousand of us all under one roof. Crypto is in a position for the first time to actually onboard these institutions, and they're showing up. We have companies from BlackRock to Visa launching real products in the space. We have the real world asset narrative taking off. We have things like payments that have been exponentially growing. And then we have things like DePIN happening in the Solana ecosystem. There's a ton of capital right now in this institutional space. It's going to be coming on chain. It's going to completely change the industry. Whether you are an institution or you're a retail user or you just want to learn more about what's going on in the space, this conference is for you. You're going to be able to meet some of the best and smartest people in the space. The speaker lineup is absolutely incredible, and you'll get to hang out with me. But the best part is you actually get 10% off your ticket if you use Lightspeed10 when checking out. I put a link in the show notes. I recommend buying this today because 1, you'll forget about it. 2, these ticket prices go up every single month. So anyways, I hope to see you there. Now let's get back to the show.
I want to get the story, the chronological ordering correct here. So you started with you did some NASCAR, which that was actually also a fun game. I played that a good amount. I would just go backwards and then just hit the cars when I get bored.
Same. That's all I did too.
Yeah. And then you did Madden, and then so like let's kind of maybe go through that at a high level, and then what did you do right after that?
Yeah, so I spent all that time kind of going through the QA, moving my way up the corporate ladder there at EA, right, which is pretty slow and arduous. You're hoping for your 1 to 3% merit increase each year. You're really cutthroat against other people, and a lot of that stuff I just didn't like. Of course, I just loved working on the game, and so as I moved my way up through the kind of ranks, and then finally got that Madden lead job, the creative director job at EA was not fun at all for me. I'd gotten through those years to where I was a pretty good engineer. I could make features myself. I was doing mocap. I could do audio. It's kind of like a hatchet man at everything. And you get to this spot of creative director, and all I'm doing is making PowerPoints. All I'm doing is going to meetings, big team, 100+ people, fighting with development managers over schedules constantly. It was just kind of like a real drag. And, Madden, a lot of people don't realize how stressful it can be. I mean, that yearly release is never budging, and you're trying your damnedest to make it sort of rise out of its, flat area where everyone just sort of like, okay, they know about Madden. You're always trying to get it up out into the mainstream. Like, well, this is as good as Call of Duty. This is as big as, whatever big game. And so it was always very stressful. So I just got so burned out on that life, like no longer being able to code, no longer being able to create, just really like convincing dudes and marketing why I thought I should do what I was doing. So I left with a group of other people. There was a former GM of our studio who started a startup. It's called Rochambeau, and raised around, and about 10 of us all left on the same day from EA Tiburon, and built basically a little studio that was doing kind of social mobile, really early on, Facebook game type stuff in 2010, 2011. And within a year and a half, money was about gone. And, our games were commercial, very successful, like very, not commercial, sorry, critical successes, not commercial successes, just ripping through runway. And so around that time, free to play had really started to take off. And I thought, as a designer, my role at this point was design director or whatever, wherever I was going, I was like, I got to learn how free to play works. Because I'd come from this, Madden world where we're just cramming in the coolest feature we can think of. We're trying to do all this top level polish. And I thought, well, free to play is really kind of the future here. I got to learn it. So I went to Zynga after that, thinking they are going to be the best, chance to learn like the sort of science of free to play. Because at that time, my mom was spending half her salary on Farmville, and it was just sort of like, what are they doing? It was crazy. So I spent about a year and a half there, and that's where I really started to get the itch of like, okay, I need to build my own thing. Like, I think I can do this myself. I've sort of learned from the best of all these like different various genres and various styles of games, and my coding chops and Unity were all kind of bubbling up, I thought, well enough. And then of course App Store was like now this moment that, hey, you can release a game yourself and put it out to the entire globe. It's mind blowing. So I was like, all right, I got to try it. And so that's really what got me to build the very first photo finish game, which was originally called Derby King, but that was built by myself and released in Australia alone. And that was just a little arcade horse racing game that my whole goal was just to see if I could do it, see if I could pay off the credit card that had bought the Unity license, and it eventually like started to run away successfully. Like it started to, it would make $30 in a day on 30 users. And I'd be like, I can't be right. So then I'd put the $30 back into an ad campaign, and it would get 60 or 80 new users, and then it would make $100 in a day. And I'm just like, this can't be right. Just like I couldn't believe it. And so sure enough, I just kept stacking all the revenue back into marketing on Facebook ads. And before I knew it, I had a, successful game, and I had to build a game studio around it. And then in between there, FanDuel, I ended up working kind of like tandem with them. So I did some design and game development work with FanDuel at the same time as Photo Finish, the original one, was growing. And then FanDuel got in legal hot water. But that was a great spot for me. Again, I wanted to learn more about the real money and more about, wagering and all these kind of cool skill-based gaming. So that it was sort of a great opportunity to be able to do both. And so that was, once they got into legal hot water, they kind of closed the studio here in Orlando. And so I was able to go full speed back on photo finish. And yeah, we've been, third time has been operational since then, 2015.
That's interesting. FanDuel is actually, some of the co-founders are actually also on Solana now.
Yeah, Nigel and I talk a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a fun trivia fact.
Mm-hmm.
Why horses? Why horse racing? How did that idea come to be?
Yeah, people have asked that a lot of like, were you a fan? No, not a fan at all. Had been to one horse race my entire life. It was like as a sophomore in college. It was really for me kind of a combo of researching and trying to find a niche that I could build in, and that's been third time's sort of MO since we've been in business. Is I think that as a small group of people, we can build very high end and high polished experiences that compete with teams of 20 or 30 or 50, but we can't compete when it comes to the marketing side. And so I thought about like, all right, should I make a football game? That was sort of my first thing. Should I go toe to toe with Madden? And the resounding answer is no. There's no, they will destroy me. They will destroy me from a marketing side. They'll probably destroy me from a legal side. And it felt like I can't play in the same pool that the EAs and Zyngas are in, because I saw the way they were. I saw how litigious Zynga was. I saw how litigious EA were. I was just like, I can't go up head toe to toe against those folks. So, but my thesis was that like, wow, I Googled top sports in the world. I love sports. I love sports games, and you're going down. Okay, there's soccer, football, there's NFL, there's tennis. I'm like, oh, maybe I can make tennis. It's not bad. I'm like moving my way down, and cricket. Well, I don't know how cricket works. And the number 5 is horse racing. And so then I go to the app store, search for tennis, search for horse racing, tons of tennis games, tons of golf games, 0 horse racing games. Like there were a few, but they were absolute trash, So I'm like, okay, this feels like a sport that is underserved. That was the first sort of thesis. And then as I'm looking at it, I'm like, well, this is pretty easy to make. My coding chops aren't great. I never went to school for engineering. I just learned everything on my own. So it's sort of like, I can't really make a tennis physics sim very easily, especially online or something. It's like horse racing. They kind of run on a lane. Like I could do that. So there was sort of like these like thesis there of like, what could I do by myself? What do I think is an underserved, niche? And then what is an area that, EA will leave me alone and Zynga will leave me alone. I was still very concerned that they would come after me if I did something. And so that really was it. And, but as I said before, like I had 0 expectations that the original photo finish would end up with, 10, 15 million downloads, right? It was like, it was nowhere near that. I was like hoping I made $1,500. That was what I was going for. So everything has been a little bit reactive since then, but it's cool to then see though that like the thesis was sort of proven of like, oh, there is an audience for horse racing games. No one has served them. It is a really fun sport to be a part of. It's exciting. Like it's got all the great things about it, the real money, the competition, the session is only a minute or two. It's like, it's perfect for, so a lot of these things fell into place. And so maybe we got lucky on half of it, but the other part was really like, part of the thesis to try it.
Yeah, there's like 2 things there that are quite important. And I want to highlight for just anybody, especially founders who might be listening. And so the first is you worked backwards from the market, right? That's quite important. Most people just have some random idea and they're like, okay, I'm just going to force into the market. It's like, that's not going to work. Okay. You literally worked. I don't think you could not have worked more backwards from the market. You literally
right. Yeah.
You literally looked at what was happening, the niches, the underutilized parts, and then you're like, okay, I'm just going to build something for that. So that's really the way to do it, or at least it's the most successful way of doing it in my view. And then 2 is like it's not like you just had this innate passion for horse racing since day 0. It's like many times you actually build something and then after you like start appreciating more and more, and then you're like, okay, wait a minute, this is actually really cool. So it's actually like the passion kind of sometimes comes after the like the work you put in. So I think those are 2 important things. You started kind of getting some success, like maybe indie game success with this thing, and you were kind of reinvesting the money you made into marketing and whatnot. set up a little studio. Why? What happened such that you're like, okay, I need to use crypto for this? Like, how did crypto
Right.
come into play?
Yeah, it's funny how all these things have stacked to put us where we are, because all the roads lead right to it. And so what had happened, right? We launched the first horse racing game, Photo Finish, or Derby King, whatever. Huge amount of downloads, low amount of revenue. So meaning, we would get $1 per user, maybe. That was sort of it. That was the lifetime value. So as ads got harder and harder and more expensive, we tried to add more features and build more stuff, try and basically increase LTV of the users. It was always really difficult. The game, of course, as you recall, I built by myself, so it was just awful and hacky and just terrible to work with. So we said, all right, let's make a sequel to the original. That was around 2018. And the goal of this new game will be to, put massive spend into the long tail. So whereas the first game was really high retaining up front, very low spend, let's do the other way. And let's go like long-term retention, long-term infinite meta game, infinite spend. And, trying to utilize these things I'd learned a lot more at, Zynga or FanDuel, trying to get more revenue in. And so we succeeded at that. Horse Racing Manager was a game that had low DAU, but insanely high spend. I mean, certain players spent over 6 figures on this mobile game that, there's no money out. It was just purely entertainment. They were competing against each other. And, but as we got farther and farther into that game, it was like, how do we increase the audience of this? It was very hardcore. And we started looking at like, okay, well, let's start doing some real money stuff. Let's start thinking about betting or breeding with each other, just open ecosystem type ideas. And anything we attempted was immediately shot down by Google and Apple in terms of that area. Obviously, this is early 2019-ish. We were looking at like even having a version on the web that would have a little more of an open purchasing and payment platform. Well, that was a TOS violation and would get us delisted. So there's all this like kind of centralization problems of Apple that were happening. And so as we started looking around and like, we'd kind of just let them both fade down into nothing. They were just in maintenance mode. We had spun up a little studio idea for Glue Mobile where we were working on like a little fishing game for a little bit. The horse racing game was just sort of like on, sort of cruise control. And start of 2021 is when I saw Top Shot finally kind of lift off. And that was like, oh, crypto's now here. People can now accept this. I'd seen and tried CryptoKitties and other stuff early on, but thought, well, this doesn't work. These gas fees and all this stuff is insane. It's just like, this is only for crypto nerds and crypto maxis. Shouldn't say nerds. We're all crypto nerds at heart, right, Mert? But the biggest problem there was like, well, can our current horse racing games utilize this idea or, and not really. And so, but in my head immediately though, it was like, what would happen if we made an open game, like entirely where we are no longer in control of really anything? What would that feel like? And so I spent like a week kind of prototyping, drawing up stuff of like, if this was kind of Top Shot, where every horse was an open, item that they could buy and sell from each other, what does it mean? And so that's where I started getting into the like, well, I'm looking around and seeing the supply issues that these people keep running into. And so that's where I started writing up, well, like what happens if they age and they die? And, so it just really kind of organically went from there. And by the end of 2021, maybe middle part of 2021, word was getting out that I was working on this, like between my friends or whoever. And I mean, VCs were like pounding down my door to invest in us. And so I'm like, all right, so maybe this is legit. Maybe we really need to do this, because it was really just like the idea. We got 2 successful horse racing games. What if we made a Web3 version where now we no longer have to have this big wall in front of us? We can do real money. We can do, wagering and betting. We could do all of this utilizing the sort of financial side of crypto, and started from there. So that was really like the kind of jumping off point. The other was also I spent like I think it took 3 months and about 60 grand of my own money to get a legal opinion first before we could even do anything. because I was so scared that like I was seeing all these games, and to me, I'm like, that's illegal. Like, even like Zed Run at the time, everyone was like, "Oh, did you look at Zed?" And like I looked at Zed, and I'm like, "That's illegal." Like I can't do that. It was like that's real money gaming in Florida. That's illegal. Um, so it really was a lot of that stuff too before I got into like actually accepting fundraising, and then growing off of that.
Ian, what are some of the factors that have set Photo Finish apart? Because Zed Run is something that really took off, I think, in 2021. Saw a lot of people talking about it. It's a horse racing game. But I know like one critical component you talked about is the life cycle of these horses. And you introduced this concept called the power law, which I'd never heard of before. Can you describe that for us? I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so like again, Zed, I try to not knock on it all because I think it was amazing what they did. And those guys reached out to us, and we chatted way back in the day, 2019, about sharing our horse racing engine with them and stuff. So there was never any like bad blood. We're not in some crazy competition because I think they are. They're totally different games. They made an arcade style game. We went hardcore, authentic sim. But I looked at, maybe in my opinion, what I saw was happening with them at the time, because I bought Zed horses, early on, and I bought Top Shot moments, and I kind of couldn't believe that all of them were going to have inflationary supply with no decay. And maybe this was just, yeah, the fact that I had been living in free to play for so long, had gone through the sort of Zynga boot camp and all of these things that it's like this power law or the power curve, you know, if you continually increasingly add assets, like you've got to chase it, so if some user is getting better and better and better and better, what does the new user do? Not like he's never going to catch up. And so you have to keep creating assets up at the top of the curve, and then you end up creating this game that's like only for the top 1% of the people that are playing. And I mean, look at any mobile game now, Clash of Clans or Clash Royale or something, they're just like, they just keep making new assets for the top end of people. And everyone that's new, they've got to grind their ass off for, a year to get caught up into that new sort of thing. And so, when I thought about where we were with Horse Racing Manager, the 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 job that we had to do on that was very demoralizing. What you're doing is you're churning out content. We call it a content treadmill. You're doing it at the top end of that power curve. So, anyone new is not getting it or seeing it, but that's how you monetize these games. And so I thought, well, what we had learned with Horse Racing Manager was uh, horses aging and leaving the game is like the whole point. That's such a more interesting meta of a long game of create a great bloodline rather than create a great single horse. And I thought that was pretty much the no-brainer. And my concern was, would the gaming community be okay with that? When we announced, I mean, I was like, this is the game. I'm not going to change this part, but I don't know if you'll like it, which is that whatever you buy is going to die. That was really a different, like everyone in 2021, NFTs, they're immutable. They're going to last forever. I'm going to take this and give it to my grandkids. I'm going to use this thing that I bought here in Fortnite 10 years from now. They had this whole like notion that every asset on the chain was just like locked in time and amazing forever. So I was actually pretty concerned. I'm like, we're going to come out and be like, yeah, it's actually not that. You have your horse. Yeah, but it's going to die in 8 months, or whatever, 24 months. But I think that was so critical. I mean, when I explained that, I didn't say it out of negativity. I said, this is why we have to do it, because the game won't last if you don't. And that was, I think, Zed's, and not just Zed, every crypto game's Achilles heel is an inflationary supply that, okay, now there's 100,000 of something, there's 200,000, there's 500,000 of something, and there's the same 10,000 users. What happens? Prices go way down, users leave. So you have to have this sort of pull back. So either you keep doing the power creep, or you pull them away, you decay stuff, right? I mean, it's just kind of the two options you have. And I thought, well, horse racing's perfect. This is how it works in real life. They race for a year and then they retire. They get the hell out. Secretariat, I always said this in the decks. Secretariat, amazing horse, ran for a single year. Like imagine if he ran for 30 years. Like what would have happened to the rest of the industry? Yeah, maybe they'd had some fans, but no one else would have won anything. No one else would have been, interested. It's kind of the Jordan, but way worse. So I think that's been the key part. Just make a bloodline. Don't make a single horse, and once they know that that's the case, you can't change that on people midstream usually. They have to kind of sign up with the beginning knowing that, then you're okay. But otherwise, if you've got a runaway inflationary supply problem in your game, you can't all of a sudden be like, all right, never mind, we're going to burn everything. They're not going to be super cool with that.
One comment I have to add to that. So I think it's a horse ages a year every 4 weeks, and these horses, you race them, you can breed them, you can have a stud. Obviously, then if it's a female, you can have babies. But I've actually seen people write obituaries about their horses when they die. Like,
Yeah,
people are passionate about this.
And they're not even dead yet. They're just retired. So they don't actually die until, what's the first crop is going to die at the 25-month mark or something. That, I imagine there'll be some tears shed, because it's not just they stopped racing, but now they're gone, and we're going to, switch the art out with a statue. And, obviously we're delaying. We haven't built all that yet. Got a little time to get there. But yeah, I was pretty surprised when the first crop retired out, like forcefully, they had to stop racing when they were turned 8 or turned 9 or whatever the 8. It's always, there were people like writing these, heartfelt goodbyes to their virtual horse. I was like, man, that's how you know you've got something special, though. When people are really like digging into the lore and the fiction that much, it's pretty awesome.
Yeah. So talking about that, I mean, I think most people who weren't very early to Solana don't know this, but you guys were really one of the earliest NFT projects. Well, I mean, you're a gaming project, you're an NFT project, but you had an NFT. It was right around the time of, right before NFT summer took off, I would say. You guys had the stylish studs, which was actually my first NFT, or my first set of NFTs. I didn't just get one. And I remember I went to like a get together with my friends, and I was like, "Yo, guys, I just sold this like online horse for like a few $1,000s." They're like, "What?" They didn't believe me.
Yeah.
And I, like, at that time I used to do like research posts, and I looked at your guys' background. I was like, "Holy shit! Like, it's very legit." These guys had a game before. They were at EA. Can you talk a bit more about what the go-to-market around NFTs around that time was? Like, so you had stylish studs, and then I believe you called them fine fillies or something like that. And that was like a pretty complex go-to-market. So what was that like?
Yeah. I mean, the look behind the curtain there is us really doing a lot of stuff on the fly. So we had started development on the game, and we had VCs lined up, ready to give money in, and I'd been talking to all the different chains, like everyone out there was talking with us, trying to kind of woo us over, to bring a horse racing game to them, because they all wanted to have the next Zed, right? I mean, every chain wanted a Zed beater or a Zed, companion or whatever you want to call it. And so when I got to talk to Colleen at Solana, at that point I knew nothing about Solana. I'd never even done anything, but I had a couple friends saying, "Hey, I just bought Solana. It's 10x in the last day," or whatever the crazy rip that Solana was on back then. And I was like, "Oh, that sounds cool." And I just loved him, man. I mean, he was like, he got it. He understood what I was coming to it, with, and I thought, well, yeah, this seems like a really good. And then he introduced me with Toli, and we talked, briefly. I was like, man, this guy's super smart. These guys it just seemed so much more connected to the real world use cases that I was looking at. Whereas a lot of the other chains, it felt kind of academic, I guess, almost. It was like rather more of the decentralization or this and that. They would talk a lot about us running our randomization engine on chain and things like that. And I'm like, I don't really care about that. I don't really, I don't want to spend $100 every time I race on fees. So there was a lot of that sort of disconnect. And so with Solana, I was like, he basically said, hey, they just wrote this program to Mint, on Metaplex. Here's the tutorial if you want to go check it out. And so it was literally like, well, let's try it. Let's see what it does. And so we priced it super low, and I posted in our Discord of current mobile game users, hey, we're doing this Mint to try and, see what it's all about, making a new sequel. If you guys get in on this thing, maybe it goes up, maybe it's going to be cool. It was like it wasn't really a fundraising thing because we put it so cheap. It was 0.2 SOL when everyone else was doing 3 and 5 and, huge amounts. It was just sort of like, yeah, let's just see how it works. It was kind of a prototype. And I thought, we'll reward our player base, kind of the idea. We'll reward the current players. And Big Brain and Dudas posted about it. And in about 10 minutes, 15,000 people appeared in our Discord.
I was one of them.
And yeah, and it was mayhem. I mean, I was like, oh my God. And it was exciting, so exciting, like this huge injection of, energy. But then all of a sudden I'm like, oh no, our poor, poor player base. So they're like, what the hell is going on? They were all scared. They didn't buy any Soul NFTs. They didn't want to. A lot of them didn't have computers. They were all on mobile only. So it was a huge disconnect for me. I thought we're going to convert all these current users into, Web3 game SQL. And I think we got like 3 of them, it's the only ones that came over, and the rest were all brand new. Wag me this, GM that, all these things. I'm like, what is happening? The memes, everything was going crazy. So then it was like, what are we going to do now? Because we've got to make this game that we know will take at least a year to build. And you've got people in there with like the timeline of second. What's up with the floor price? Why is it trying? What's the, we're like, we did not expect that level. It's like when you hear Kevin Rose talk a little bit about that of Moonbirds, of course, his, from small to these huge prices, he wasn't expecting it. I do sympathize with that a little bit of like, he should have expected it. He's a lot more popular than me or us. But at the same time, like we weren't prepared at all, So then I'm like, I don't even have a community manager. I didn't have anyone to run Discord. Like we had channels that were people could post in public announcement channels and stuff. We hadn't set up any of the permissions. We hadn't done anything. So we were like just totally on fire for 6 months. I mean, I was having major anxiety attacks and had to get on medications. And I mean, it was just like I wasn't sleeping because it was such a massive jump from what our sort of day to day was. But yeah, but as a team, as you kind of like rally around, we're like, look, we've got to extend. We're going to lose all these people if we don't give them something to do for the next year, because the game's going to take a really long time to be out. And, we did end up getting a beta out within about 6 months. But even then, it was like, how are we going to fill 6 months, given everyone's, hourly attention span? And so that's where we started doing a lot of the NFT ideas. Let's read these together. Let's airdrop a bunch of them to people. Let's do these breeding tools. Let's give them previews of how the genetics work. So it was kind of like this long tutorial that we were giving to people to give them something to do, to keep them engaged, all within the Solana NFT space and ecosystem, in sort of a way to kill time until the game got playable. So yeah, we had not planned. Like my first pitch was people that own, and this was to my original community, people that own this stylish stud will get access to play the game first. That was it. That was my pitch. And, soon after that, I'm like, that's not going to cut it. Like there's way too much energy on this to just be like, yeah, this is it's just a pass to hang on to. And that's it. So yeah. So we kind of like, spun up from there.
Yep. I remember those days. And you guys were extremely early. I was just on Twitter one day and I saw Big Brain just show this, like he talks about like the game, and I was like, I don't give a shit. And then I looked at the picture of the horse and I was like, I'm looking for a new PFP. I kind of like horses, so I'll just try it. That's the only reason I tried it out.
Yeah.
And then so that was and then as I did more research, it was, I was very impressed because at the time it was just all scams. I mean, oh my goodness.
Yeah, that was the hard part for sure. Was like, and it really difficult on me. I mean, I'm a very competitive person. I'm very like, just I want to win at all costs sometimes, and it was really hard to go through like a year straight of scam after bad project after non-doxed founder, just mint and make millions of dollars, leave, mint millions of dollars, leave. And I'm sitting over here just struggling, like keeping everybody together. Like the floor, no one cares about. No one trades the NFT because they want to hold it for crown, and you're just like, dang, man, I did this all wrong. But I was so angry. I mean, definitely, I got very jaded on Solana ecosystem through 2022, as most probably did. But I was happy that we stuck around, because it's like I still had the belief in Tully and Colleen. You know, it's like those, no matter what, like I know that those two know what they're doing. And so whatever ecosystem stuff is happening, it's kind of not really their fault. It's the grifters, but it's a big negative on the space. It's such a bummer that I can't really tell my friends. Almost every slowly as the old gamers have come over into the game, almost all of them have gotten taken for hundreds or thousands of dollars from scammers. You know, and it's just like it's so hostile, this space. It's really frustrating. You know, I don't know the solution, but it's really hard to imagine bringing normies in still because how easily they get scammed in Discord or fished or whatever. You know.
Yep. Yeah, it's a good point. You know, I'm gonna now start asking some selfish questions. I want to know how the game works, and I want to know how I can play it, and I want to know how I can be good at it. I know that Big Brain literally has like a full-time person,
Three
full-time people. So for the audience, Soul Big Brain, you probably know, he has 3 people full-time on payroll to succeed in this game and breed these horses, and they run like these stables, right? And I believe a few other NFT projects run these stables as well. So like, can you just, for somebody who's, first of all, let's say doesn't know horse racing and certainly doesn't know this game, how do I play this? How do I win? What's in it for me? Just give us the whole rundown.
Yeah, I'll try to be as high level too. It's hard to not get in the weeds when I've been working on this for so long. You know, again, it's like 8 years of nerdy horse racing stuff that we've crammed into this game. But at the top level, it's get a horse and race it and hope that you win. And the horses have attributes just like Madden players do, right? Some of them are faster, some of them are good on dirt, some of them are good on turf. You know, they have all these attributes that you use as your skill as an owner to try and find a race that's best for them. So that's the top level managerial move. It's very low lift. It's likened, you know, our previous games where you would have to grind. You know, you would train them all day. You would hit a million buttons. You know, it was sort of the mobile games are very much a button clicker fest. This is much more like a FanDuel or a DraftKings. You set your lineup, kind of. You know, you just say, all right, I got this horse. He's really good on turf. I feel like he's probably good at long distance. So here's a race that I think I can win, that I think I can afford to enter. And so at the top level, I mean, that's it. You find a race that you think you're good at, that's in your budget, you know, that your horse you think will win. And you're always just trying to there's a race going off every 1, 2, 3 minutes. And so it's always on. And so you can try and find some time. You can wait 2 days, 3 days to find the perfect race for you if you want. So that's sort of the core. And people that get in, that's pretty easy. But then the red pill starts happening on the depths of the game. And so, again, the horses are aging. So as you mentioned, Garrett, every month, basically, they're getting older. So they all have sort of a peak age determination down in their genetics. And so now you're like, okay, well, is he on his upswing or is he on his downswing, or she, my horse? And so then you got this decision to make of like, well, if he's getting better, or is this as good as he's going to be? Should I get rid of him? You know, is this horse going to be good enough to win this style of race? Should I try and trade? Should I try and dump it? Should I get another one? Should I get 2? And then as they start getting farther into their career, now you're having to decide, well, should I retire it? Because I want to breed. I want new horses. This one's just, you know, maybe it didn't pan out. But if it's a female horse now, maybe if she breeds with a really top stud, then the next one will be much better. And I'll hit the, you know, jackpot on the next stud or on the baby. And so then once you get into breeding, it's like crazy in depth, right? So at the top level, again, those attributes are what you see. The speed, he's good at dirt, good at turf. But down underneath, they actually have a full genome. And so when they breed, it is a actual genetic simulation. Even their coat colors are 100% accurate to real life coat color genetics. And so every bit of the detail is there. So you get this kind of Jurassic Park thing where you're trying to mutate, you're trying to push him out of his normal. You know, you might see 2 horses and you think, okay, they're going to average together. A good speed and a good speed is going to be a good speed. But there are certain genes that express differently or pass differently. The allele is different when they're combined. And so then you're looking around the market of like, well, which one is passing better genes down to the progeny? And all of it's there. The entire history is there. You can go look at every horse's bloodline, his racing history, his parents' racing history. And so that's where people start getting like really like, oh my God, this is like for me, right? This is because it's not for everyone, but the people that are really into that, now you can look at the rest of the population of horses and say, oh, here's a spot that no one's breeding into. If I can jump out in front of that, I'll win every race. Or, there's all kinds of like little moves that you can make. Oh, if I try and grab some of that bloodline and bring it into my bloodline, I'm going to have this super thing, So, and honestly, I've loved our lack of work on that area. Like we literally do nothing, and all of the game is happening from the users. All of the lore they're all talking about. They're doing streams. They're creating fan sites. They're creating ads for their stud. They're making like this whole ecosystem and world, and we just know that like the genetics underneath are making it random and variant enough that it's kind of unbeatable. It's an unbeatable because we can't even beat it. It's like an algorithm that will last forever. Um, and so I think that's what's really got most people hooked. You start at the easy end, and then you get really in depth of like, I want to dominate this thing for the long haul. And the long haul takes months, right? There's no like fast forward. There's no cheat to it. And so I think that's
Is
why
it
you see, the
is
retention's so
that
high.
for just like the intrinsic enjoy, like, because there's this one of the biggest criticism of Web3 gaming is like games should be enjoyable intrinsically and you shouldn't need some external stuff. But in this case, not only is that there's also other stuff, right? Like when you win, I'm guessing there's some sort of financial something,
Yeah.
right? It's a horse case. So how does that work?
Yeah. So the races are for real money. If you want to, there are free races too, but most people are racing for real money. And so of course you want a winner. If you've got a loser, how long are you going to stick with it? You're going to just probably take 2 or 3 losses and like probably give up on them. But that's a great part of the market is that some people have a longer patience than others. And so you can see, well, this guy lost 3 times in a row, dumped him because he's pissed at the horse. He has like I'll never win with that horse. Another smart owner can pick it up and try and like find another area for him to race in that maybe is profitable because you're not having to beat everyone. You only have to beat like 4 or 5 other horses in a race. You're just trying to find the right race that will win. So yeah, we do also reward tokens on top. So that's sort of that's our UA or user acquisition marketing angle is if you're racing, you're earning a crown. And that's sort of we've got that set to hopefully emit for infinity. It's like kind of doing a halving over time. So that's the way you're earning this crown token is just go race, just go race, just go race, and you're able to earn some more of the crown token. But I don't think, obviously there is a financial incentive there and a lot of people won't play if they're negative forever. I fully understand that, but it's not any different from poker or DraftKings or FanDuel. That's how they work. All those games, it's like if you lose over and over and over again, yeah, you might bust out. But in this game, there's such a lot more to do that maybe you bust out and you can't race, but you're like, well, I'll just breed at least. Maybe I'll get a good one next season. So they could bust out and quit racing because they just can't do it. But well, I'll hang on to this one and I'll keep going. So there's something there always pulling them back. And we see that like every month, the first day of the season, all the new horses are born. It's every time, every single user comes back that maybe has like taken the last 2 weeks off because they ran out of cash or whatever, here they come right back in. It's like we have a mint, the excitement of a mint day every single 28 days because everyone's back to see what their foals are, see what other people bred. But yeah, I do think it stands on its own without a token. I think it runs without it. But we utilize that token as marketing. So it's kind of free marketing dollars. We're doing UA without having to, with a token that we created, as opposed to having to like pay Facebook to give us, ads. So that's how we do it. Which I think, again, it'll be less users that will play, the less profitable it is. I'm not stupid, but that'll be the game that we play. Once we find what is that amount of how much can we spend on a user, how much can we give away per user, it's going to always cost marketing dollars to keep new users coming in. That's just how it goes. But right now we have that really benefit of being able to not have to spend any money, just token to do it.
Yeah, I saw a stat. I think it was over the last 30 days of the top 10 horses combined made over $75,000, which is pretty absolutely insane. Everything you're describing here is like a good way to have retention with your customers, which is something that all of DeFi struggles with. And the thing is with crypto that everyone talks about is like, what is the next narrative? And I think the reason for that is that there's just attention saturation, the sense that there's no seasons. Like it's not episodic. Like the NFL, you have games on Sundays and it's, for 1/3 of the year and then it comes back later. So you always have something to look forward to and there's storylines. Whereas like crypto has some storylines, but it's just never ending. So at some point that speculation is going to run out. It's going to get saturated, right? And it sounds like that is almost like what you're fighting against. And that's where you've introduced this, horse's age. And then you have this bloodline, you have these genetics. Is there anything else that you want to introduce into the game? Is there anything else you think that maybe founders in crypto should be thinking about? Because I think this retention piece is so important.
Yeah, there's a million things, of course. I think, when I look at the final form of photo finish, what I'm excited that we're moving towards is more decentralization. Now, it doesn't mean that it has to be like this, multi-sig DAO controlled things, or I don't really care about that. It's more that like we're already seeing a lot of interest level in people owning the tracks. So Mert mentioned, that Big Brain, he owns a large majority share of a track in the game. It's called Big Brain Fairgrounds. He branded it with his own logos. And what that means is he's also getting some of that Derby, the in-game currency that's flowing through that track that's helping him power his stable. And so there's this great little loop there of like he's incentivized to host races at his track. He's incentivized to advertise at his track. He's incentivized to be an entrepreneur of this virtual, race course. And so as we think about that, a year from now, 2 years from now, it's like we could hypothetically leave the game entirely. We could get out of the way entirely. The entire schedule, all of the races could be determined by the track owners. They could decide who's racing there, how much it costs to enter, which races they host. And we're just sort of like, well, and then what's cool about that is like right now we're trying to attack it very much from a design standpoint. We're trying to say, okay, this is the population of horses. We're trying to like really get it dialed in, and we've struggled. We've succeeded. It's ups and downs. It's been very difficult. Population is always like sort of moving in and out. But if you put that out to an open market, like the market will level and find its water. The big brain, if he's got staff to go do the analysis on where to host the most successful races, there's something really interesting about that idea of like an open ecosystem that they really fully control. And so, I mean, I think that's where I really am stoked to see what Web3 can do, because that is the ethos of just really like giving people an aligned ownership with you and them, which was so opposite of how mobile was. I mean, mobile and free to play were very antagonistic relationship between you and your user. You're trying to get them to continue to spend money over and over and over again, open loot box over and over and over again, kind of preying on them. And I never felt good about it. I hated it. It's like, that's the way you make money in mobile, everyone say. You charge them for energy, you charge them for a loot box. And it's sort of like, yeah, but that sucks. Like, I like designing fun things that feel good. I like designing the hit stick. I don't like tuning how much to screw someone in loot box random number generators. It's like, that's no fun. So I think like the more that we can build into these sort of aligned incentive things with the game, so like the track ownership, again, the horses. I mean, we have this army of players now that are our marketing team. They're amazing because of course they're aligned to make this game do better. All the players of Madden just shit on Madden 24/7. And, they're not getting anything for, destroying their own bags, or anything like that. They're not fudding their own bags.
Yeah, on that, one thing I think that is cool for people that don't play these games is that in Madden and NCAA football, especially NCAA football, because it stopped in maybe 2012 or something like that, is that there's actually people out there that have been updating the rosters in that last game every single year, because you can download rosters from online. So they're actually updating it for these future teams. And that shows you that someone is taking ownership in it, even though they're getting paid nothing for that. Right?
Yeah,
there's nothing there. And so it's like, if you can take that feature and bring it into crypto and then people can actually benefit from it, I think that's huge.
Yeah, I mean, I posted last night, so on Twitter, it was just shocking to me. So one of our community members, this guy, Roaring Hammy, which you guys have probably seen in your replies, he's been in our community for basically since the beginning. Just an unbelievable Energizer bunny at Twitter. And he relentlessly shills photo finish to anyone that'll hear about it. And he's just constantly experimenting with different ways. Like he's reply guy, right? But so he has a video of the original one of the photo finish Kentucky Derbies, the virtual ones that we ran. And I looked at it last night just so happened to see he replies to like every major account with, "Hey, have you seen this video? Hey, like when they post something, isn't it wild that this?" He tries to slip it in organically. It doesn't really feel all that chilly. That video has a 1.5 million views now on Twitter. And I went and looked at the real Derby video on the real Derby account. It has 500,000 views. And it's just like, that is the difference. He is aligned because of course he wants this game to be more successful. He's our marketing guy. And it's like, so we're all on the same page. I didn't have to pay him, but he's still rewarded by doing so, by making the game a success. So I think it's really special, this world. I just want it to grow. I mean, I think Mert says it too. It's just so small. I was definitely tricked at the beginning by feeling like it was on fire and there was going to be 1 million users here, when in reality there's not that many like players in this space for sure.
Yeah, certainly not.
Yeah.
But I think maybe another L2 or L3 might help. And so okay. Final question is going to be: you guys have done some interesting stuff with like NBC, I believe, and like the official horse races, like real life horse races. You've partnered with them in some sense. What does that look like? Like, how should we think about that? Because that seems quite under indexed on. Like, that seems like a bigger deal.
Yeah. So, I mean, the NBC relationship we've had for 5 years now, maybe 6. That relationship is very like informal and chill. Basically, if they have a race that they're running on a national broadcast that they want a prediction or a simulation of, just like you imagine a 3D version of, then they hit us up. And so we create those typically for the Triple Crown races. And so what that does for us is it ends up as an advertisement. Like as it runs, there's a install photo finish play now. So we get this like free $1 million ad in essence for making those videos for them. Now, of course, I've always wanted to dig in deeper on that relationship. Every year they've asked, "Hey, do you think you could build this? Could you build that?" And I just haven't had time. Like if you look at Peyton Manning and those guys, when they do their broadcast, they've got all these touch screens and they're moving stuff around and they're doing all these like kind of stuff we did at EA too. And I would love to do that, but I just haven't had time. It's just not a core competency of us either to make a broadcast, a 3D tool. But then the Kentucky Derby came off of that. So Kentucky Derby, we are the proud official partner, official game of the Kentucky Derby. And so getting that license took years, a lot of discussion, very painful. But for me, that was how I thought we should absolutely be in business with a company like this and form our moat. I mean, I obviously work in EA Sports. You see how important the license is to have the real teams, have the real tracks. There's no bigger name in the sport than the Derby. And so to have the Kentucky Derby, basically what that means for us is that we can host a virtual Kentucky Derby in the game. We do it every month, every 28 days. So we have all the official branding, Churchill Downs, the Derby. And now, that track ownership that I was mentioning, like, Big Brain has his own track. It's like, well, Churchill has their own track. So they live in the ecosystem just like all of us. And they're also incentivized to get more people to come race at the virtual Churchill Downs. So I think what we provide is really exciting. It's really early with them. We're still trying to figure out what's the best avenue to approach because they are, a very traditional 150-year-old organization, and so what do we do with this kind of like crazy fast WAGMI GM community compared to the Churchill Downs community? But what it allows is this sort of like Kentucky Derby can matter all year round. Louisville can matter all year round. It can matter in other locations, that you can really start to make this brand spread to other places. So, I mean, this year's Kentucky Derby is a huge event. It's the 150th anniversary. Everyone's kind of like all sights set on this in May. I think we have over 40 photo finish members flying in from everywhere to come. First turn club, tables, VIP experience. These folks, a lot of them have never seen a horse race. A lot of them have never done anything with the sport. They're coming from like Isle of Man. They're coming from Australia to Louisville to experience the sport that they've learned purely from the virtual version. So I think that's the big benefit is you can kind of like onboard the poker fan, the daily fantasy fan, the sports bettor into this amazing sport that normally you can't really get into. Like if you wanted to own a horse, what do? No one really knows. How do you get a horse? How do you feed it? Like that. Whereas this, you've got this kind of natural step through the game. So that's, I think, what we're offering. And then, of course, what they're offering is, their brand and being able to say and be a part of this huge, massive brand, especially leading into 150 is super exciting for us.
It's incredible that a crypto game and the Kentucky Derby have partnered together. If you,
I know, man.
It's insane. If you need any content at the Kentucky Derby, hit me up. Give me a ticket. I'll be there.
Come with. Yeah, I will hit you up after this because I mean we did the infield last year. We had a tent, and it ended up being like there was no internet because that's how it is when you're there. So it ended up being kind of a bust on like we just showed a lot of people the game. That ended up kind of it. We didn't like get a lot of new users, but it was a pretty interesting, massive moment for me as I'm looking around and it's like Budweiser, White Claw, BMW, third time. I was just like, what in the world? How did we get here? I mean, it would have been a massive deal signing if that was EA. Instead of think my little tiny studio, crypto game. It's awesome, but they believe in us. I think the NBC part really helped too, for sure.
Love it. Well, Ian, thanks so much for coming on. You have a fascinating story. Photo finish is insanely cool. I didn't know about it until I was getting ready for this episode. So I'm going to put a link in the show notes. Everyone go check it out. And Ian, thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, guys. My pleasure.
All right, we'll see you next time. All right, I've got a little ending note here. First, thank you so much for listening to the full episode. If you really liked it, hit subscribe. But secondly, make sure you sign up for DAS. This is Blockworks' biggest institutional conference happening in London in March. I've included a link in the show notes and also a discount code. You get 10% off. Make sure to use Lightspeed 10 when you sign up. All right, I'll see you there, and I'll see you next time on Lightspeed.